All right, everybody, thank you for joining us this afternoon for our speaker series on what reconciliation means to me. In a moment, I'll introduce Paul Andrew, our speaker. Just a couple of logistical things, if we could. If you could keep your mics muted, that would be grand. That gets rid of any background noise. If you've got any questions, please send them through the chat box through Zoom, and I'll pass them on to Paul. And the last thing is we are recording this session and we'll be putting it up on the Law Society YouTube channel. It'll be up sometime this afternoon. So if you aren't able to stay for the whole presentation, or you've got colleagues who want to see it, or you want to see it again later, you can do that. I now want to turn things over to Paul Andrew. I want to take a second to introduce Paul, although he's known, I'm sure, to many of you. Paul is Mountain Dene. He was born in Toledo. Paul is a residential school survivor. He was in Grolier Hall. He's a former chief in Toledo. He's a former CBC personality. And Paul is a very well-spoken and outspoken advocate for Indigenous people and for reconciliation. Paul is also the lay member of the Law Society, and we've benefited greatly from his insights in the short time he's been with us. And finally, Paul and I concluded that about 50 years ago, we played baseball against one another, a long, long time ago. All right, Paul, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe I'm on. I'm on. Thank you. And I think we lost that game against you guys. Anyways, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the Law Society for putting this series on. But more importantly, thank you to you people for being here. I've always believed that you can do all these kind of things, but if nobody shows up, nothing happens. The question that I've been asked to talk about is, what is reconciliation? And you've probably heard Mary Simon talk about her idea. The new Governor General talks about it's a way of life. A friend of mine talks about it being a personal journey. Desmond Tutu, who chaired a Commission on Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa, talks about no future without forgiveness. So obviously it is something very huge. And the more people you put in there, the more difficult it becomes. And I think in Canada, we're beginning to find out how difficult it is and how much work there has to be done. And I'm sure that you guys are familiar with the history of residential schools in the North and colonization in the Americas. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. What I would mention, though, the Prime Minister, when he apologized in 2008, he mentioned to kill the Indian in the child. And for me, that's a very significant thing. That's what we're talking about right now. That is what we are really trying to address right now. So how do you kill an Indian in a child? And again, those of you who are familiar with residential schools and colonization, it showed up in many, many ways. And residential schools came about because the Canadian government found out that if we left them in the communities, the culture, the language, the spirituality was too strong. So we got to remove them from their culture. And to this day, there are former students who will tell you, I lost my language, I lost my culture. I may have been doing okay in the non-Indigenous world, but I don't know the stories, I don't know the songs. And I was one of those. I was one of those people that, because one of the things, the very basic things about our teachings out on the land was connections, responsibilities, and relationships. And you have heard the term, all my relations, although it's people in this, Aboriginal people, Indigenous people in the South reused that term, we identify with it in the North also, because we believe that we're related to everything around us, the flowers, the trees, the skies, everything. So everything is our relations. And so we have always worked with that. What residential schools did and colonizations did was it severed all that relationships. It severed relationships and it severed responsibilities. And I don't know if anybody can identify with that. What it becomes, you become a lonely man, become a lonely person with no connections, with no relations, and therefore no responsibility. And for me, that was one of the things that I knew because I was brought up better. I was brought up on the land. First 13, 14 years of my life was primarily on the land. We went to school whenever we were in Toledo. We went to church and did all other things that one does in the community. But we still had our culture. We still had everything that went through. So residential schools did that. And so what happens when you have no connections, no relations, and no responsibilities, as I said, it's become, and what I became was an angry young man, angry, fearful young man. There's a friend of mine who makes a presentation on residential school, and she says, I should have been a statistics. I should have been one of those people who either died young in a broken down relationship and everything dysfunctional about me. I should have been in that particular area. And I identified with that because colonization and residential schools, the policy of killing the Indian in the child almost worked with her and with me. And they almost did destroy a wonderful culture, a wonderful language. But one of the things that I discovered in the process of my recovery was that you can't destroy somebody's spirit. When I was with CBC, I went to Fort Providence because I heard that there was a Holocaust survivor there. And what he was going to talk about at a residential schools conference was the resiliency of the human spirit. And I wanted to listen to that. I wanted to hear that. But I was also a reporter, and I went there as a professional, not as a former student. And I remember listening to him. And then later on, we went outside to do an interview. And I don't remember everything about the interview. What I remember the most is that he looked at me and he said, Paul, I recognize the anger. I know that anger. I know what you're going through. I would be about in my late 50s, early 50s, mid to late 50s at that time. And I remember thinking, this man knows my anger. This man knows the anger. This man knows what he talks about. And he said, and he told me about his anger. And he said, you know, there was about over 300 of us that were liberated from the concentration camp. And he said we were so dehumanized that we could not function. And people did not know what to do with us. And he said, there were people who were saying, leave them alone, leave them alone. You can't do anything with them. And I often, this man was speaking my language because that's what I felt after residential schools. Leave them alone, leave him alone. He's beyond help. We cannot do anything with him. And he said we were so angry and dehumanized. And one of the things that our people have done and continue to do, and I did for a while, was to drink. Because what booze does, at least for a very short period of time, is that if you drink enough, anger goes away. If you drink enough, fear goes away. But unfortunately, it doesn't stay away, and sometimes it gets even worse. So I knew that was not the solution. And when I knew what he was talking about was that he was not talking about Holocaust survivors. He was talking about a human being. And I knew that he was talking about me. And I also knew that what I had to do was look at me and see what I can do. And that's where my reconciliation started. Reconciliation, as I said, my friend talks about a personal journey, and that has been a personal journey for me. And in the process of dealing with my own person, so because one of the things that traditional teachings tell you is that you cannot give away what you don't have. That means what you have is what you're giving away. If you have anger, you have fear, you have loneliness, that is what you're teaching. That is what you're giving away. And I didn't want to give those things away anymore. I knew that is what is happening in my life. And when you have a severed relationship, it's very difficult to have any kind of long-term, lasting, deep relationship with people, whether it's on a personal level, professional level, or a community level. And one of the things that happens, I believe, is that we become takers. We become users. And so how do you turn all that around? What do you have to do? There's a couple of things that my elders have always told me that you have to do, is that you have to do the opposite. If the intention was to kill the Indian in the child, now you have to raise the Indian in the child. You have to bring back the Indian in the child. And so what my elders did, and one elder in particular, is he took me out on the land on a regular basis. And even though I was in my 20s and 30s, I've forgotten how to skin a moose. I forgot how to track a moose. I forgot what time you should go for certain animals, what time you should set your nets. And that's the kind of stuff he had to teach me again. I don't know if I was dehumanized, but I wouldn't be surprised if I was pretty close. It is about that time I heard the term that our people use. What's wrong with him? Doesn't seem like he feels anything. And that's the term that I hear to this day from some of the younger people. And I'm sure that same term was used to describe me too. Because when you have no relationships, when you have no connections, you don't care. You don't care. You know, a friend of mine, I was telling him, I've known him for a long time. He's on the street, and I said, you know, you should go home because, and I'll even pay your ticket home. Go home. You come from good people. A lot of those people on the streets come from good people. And I said, and he said, no. He said, I am where I was meant to be. They wanted to destroy me, and they've done it. I said, no, they haven't destroyed you. But I'm still working on them. I'm still working on them on the streets, because I believe that anybody can recover from anything. That's what the Holocaust survivor taught me. Whatever happened to you, whatever happened to me, how many times, whatever it was, we can get over it. That's what the Holocaust survivor taught me, and that's what I believe. As Glenn said, I spent a number of years with CBC. I hosted television, I hosted radio, and the criticism was pretty high. He can't speak English, he can't enunciate, he can't pronunciate. And all those things were happening. But I knew two things. One is that part of my job is to bring back pride to the people. And one of the greatest joy I had in my life was when Elder came up to me and he said, Paul, I'm very proud of you. I know what happened to you and I know your life a little bit. I'm very proud of you. That was probably the greatest joy in my life. And so part of my is that. And I wanted to say to the young people, to the people who don't believe that there's a chance of recovery, what I try to tell them is that if people can get over the Holocaust, we can get over residential schools. We can get over anything. And that's why when people criticize the way I talk, the way I sound, the way I think, the way I talk, it doesn't bother me. I don't let it bother me because this is not about me. This is about relationships. This is about connections. This is about the young people. This is about the people who may have felt that they have lost the Indian in the child. It's about them. So I put up whatever I have to put up if I have to do what I do. And one of the things that really has happened in my life is that in the process of doing that is that what I try to do is concentrate on me, is challenge myself on a regular basis. The way I look at the people on the streets, the way I look at professionals, the way I look at the men and women in relationships and connections. Again, am I being the best I can possibly be? Is this the best I bring to the world? If I'm going to a meeting, is this the best I'm bringing to the meeting? If I'm going to be with people, with families, is this the best that I can be? And that's the kind of challenge I have to do. Whatever biases that I have, whatever that I have that might hurt any kind of relationships or any kind of connections, I look at it so that I do not bring that to the table. And one of the things that I try not to do anymore is to justify, blame, or deny anymore. That my reconciliation depends on me. It doesn't depend on you people. You will help, and I'm grateful for the help. You're there to listen to my story and hear what I have to say, and I'm grateful for that. But I also know that there's only certain things you can do. I can't change you, and you can't change me, but I can inspire you, and you can inspire me. But in order to do that, I have discovered that I have to be honest. Yes, this is the guy that needs changing. It's not so much the world. This is the guy that needs a change in attitude. And so that is what I try to do, is that I do not try to do the opposite of what it. And in the process of that is that I try not to blame people anymore. Yes, there's certain things that have happened that should not have happened. Let me give you an example of how I felt that killing the Indian child policy was carried out. You know, and you probably heard about sexual abuse. And this is not talking about touching somebody accidentally. This is talking about some pretty serious issues. The physical abuse is the same thing. It's the same thing. And this is not just talking about a little strap on the knuckles. The mental and the spiritual abuse is the one that if you're told on a regular basis, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. We have to fix you. You have to become better. it's very clear. The message is that you are not good. You hear that over centuries. And I know that because I've become colonized. I remember watching cowboy and Indian movies. And the cowboy is in a place where he can't go anywhere else. And yes, he's going to get killed. And then the cavalry comes. And I remember cheering, yay! I remember that. I never knew why the Indians were fighting. I never knew. Nobody told me why the Indians were fighting. It was always about the non-Indigenous people and how, so I became colonized. And I remember saying, and in the early 70s when I was chief, we were talking about land claims. And again, that's part of the colonization. And I remember the elder saying, what are you talking about? How can you claim land that is yours? But my colonization was that, yeah, the government, they deserve it. They need it better. They've done better. No, our people were amazing. And that's the thing that I find the most amazing about what's happening nowadays, is that the pride that I have in who I am, I will put up my parents against anybody, anywhere. All you got to do is learn slavey. Then you will know how good they talk and how good, how knowledgeable they are. I will put up my elders against any elders anywhere. All you got to do is learn slavey, and you will know how good they are. Recently, when Barack Obama was elected president, one of the senators at that time said something along the lines of, we have a guy here who's very articulate, very smart, intelligent, and comes from a beautiful family. Chris Rock replied to that, and he said, we've always had intelligent people. We've always had brilliant, hardworking people. We've always had them. We've always had beautiful people. And that applies to us too. We've always had the greatest teachers in the world. I know that now. I know that. We've always had people who cared and loved each other. And they have proved that on a regular basis to the people that they're with. We've always had the teachers we have, and the knowledge that they have about cosmology, archaeology, you name it, they have it. Because I'm beginning to learn that now. And I can tell you that. I can tell you with all honesty that the knowledge that they have is everything that anybody else in the world has. And sometimes even more, because of that intimate connection they have with the land and the environment. 50 some odd years ago, I was out in the bush with an elder. And I remember he said, there's something wrong with the water. And didn't make any sense to me. But what I've learned is that you listen. He went to the water, he got some water with a cup, then he poured it out. And he said, you see this? I couldn't see it. But he said, you see that? We never used to have that. And then he went to a leaf and he said, see this is the same thing. He said, that stuff on it, you never used to have that. That comes from intimate knowledge. That comes from an intimacy with the ecosystem, not just one leaf or a little pail of water here, but the whole ecosystem, intimate knowledge. And those are the kind of things that they almost destroyed. One of the things, for example, time. We don't have months. We have times of the year. A time when the fish runs, a time when the Dall sheep has his eyes gets better. All these things is the ones, because those are the knowledge that determines when you go out in the bush. It's not, let's go, it's Saturday, so let's go out in the bush. No, you go out on the land when the fish runs, because they knew when that ran. When the moose is out. And so it almost like opposed to some of the ideas that, yes, you have to work from 9 until 5 days a week, and then you can go do what you want. No, you can't. It doesn't work that way with our way of life. But now you see that in some of the Dene communities. As soon as people have some days off, out on the land, because that's where they can do what they were taught to do. And the other thing that is almost opposed again is the concept of a higher power. The Bible says man is on top. I think Genesis talks about that. Man is on top and to be in charge of everything. Our teaching is almost exactly the opposite. Everything in the world is the most important. Man is probably the least important because we're dependent on that. If the world changes or if the world gets destroyed, it has a direct impact on us. Our job, our connections, our responsibilities, and our relationship with the land was based on that. But, and again, so a lot of us really had a difficult time with Christianity because of those kind of teachings. But those are just two examples of how our cultures, right from the start, there was a clash of ideas. But early, around the first contact, one of the reasons I thought that it worked really well in those early days was because the people who came here, the explorers, they needed us. They needed us. They wanted to go to the Pacific. They didn't know how. They needed indigenous people. And if reconciliation is to working nowadays, if reconciliation is to mean anything, then we have to recognize that we need each other. In order for me to have relationships, I need you. In order for me to have connections, I need you. In order for me to carry out my responsibility as an Indigenous person, I need you. And if I ever forget that, that would be a really sad part. It'll be even sadder if you didn't need me. So one of the things that I think that really important for me to look at on a regular basis is that, what is reconciliation all about? What do we do? You know, a few years ago when the TRC hearings were going, the chair, Marie Sinclair, was saying that maybe it'll take a generation. I think he's revised that recently. I read something when he was saying maybe my children or my grandchildren's. I still feel that's a little bit optimistic. I don't know if we'll ever get over the anger. You probably heard about the churches that are being burned. That's the anger coming out. You probably heard about a lot of other things that are happening, even in the community here. The anger coming out. And I believe it is part of the process. It is something that we have to deal with. That's the process that we have to put up with, because that's what reconciliation is all about. To get back to the place where we need each other, we have to be blunt, and we have to be sometimes saying something that might be hurtful. But that's that's the only way that I know how. I do not say things to people just for the benefit of it, for the shock or whatever you want to call it. I say it because I believe it needs to be said. And what I've come to believe is that that kind of give and take is needed. And sometimes, for example, there's always a question about whether we help or hinder each other. And sometimes I really don't know. And the only reason I bring that up, because I think it is important that we look at the things that we do, and is that the kind of things that develops relationships or connections, or are we hindering people? In the 70s, it was in the 60s that low rental houses in the Northwest Territories, in Toledo anyways, was brought in, and the government was saying, you're going to pay $2 a month. I know, because I was translating for the people in Toledo, and they said, you'll pay $2 a month and you'll have your house. And I remember one of the elders saying, don't take it, because it's going to make us lazy. We are people who get wood. We are people who get water. Don't take it. And don't trust them. And now you probably heard some of the news about where people are paying a little bit more than $2 a month. The treaties that were signed. And the thing that I remember about the discussions about the treaty, again, when I was a chief, I brought up the idea that maybe we should reject, for the benefit of the people who don't know. I probably shouldn't have to talk about it, but it's part of the story. So, is that I get $5 a year as part of the treaty. And every treaty person in the North in Canada is entitled to that. And what I suggested is, because the government has not lived up to its terms of the treaty, and the people of Canada have not lived up to the terms of the treaty, what I suggested is that we reject the treaty. And I remember after the meeting, one of the elders came up to me and he said, what's wrong with you, Paul? What's wrong with you? And I said, what? He said, we gave our word. We cannot break our word. And I remember feeling so confused about that. Because again, part of the colonization is that this is what you do. But he said, no, we keep our word. We do what we said we're going to do. And I've always have thought about that, because sometimes when I react, is that a colonized person reacting? Or is it a person who gave his word? And the people that I come from have always told me that. You got to keep your word. See, I forget those kind of stuff. And that's why colonizing the residential schools almost worked, and the Kill the Indian and the Child almost worked, because I forget about those kind of things, about those basic human. And one of the things that I've discovered is that what you have to do. See, one of the things when the treaties were signed, and what I remind Canadians on a regular basis, you're a treaty whether you're a Dene like me or you're a treaty member, and you have an obligation to live up to the terms and conditions of those treaties. If you are not living up to the terms and conditions of those treaties, then you have broken your word. And so one of the things that is important to me is that and so I went back to some of those discussions that they had. And they said, in 1921, the people that I come from were healthy, were independent, they worked hard because they had to. There was no low rental houses, there was no any kind of help from the governments, nothing. They survived because they worked hard and they helped each other and they supported each other because that's all there is. And one of the ways they supported each other is that they never lied to each other. Because if you lied on the land, it could be a matter of life and death. And I remember going out on the land, and my dad and other people would get together and they would say, we're going to this area, we're going to this area. And then when we will come back to Keel River, and then we'll build a Mooskin boat and we'll meet you at this time, around this time. And it was always about not June or July, but when the leaves turned green or when the sheep starts running, that kind of stuff. They said, so if you don't keep that word, somebody might think, oh, there's something wrong. We better go look for them. So we couldn't lie to each other. We didn't know how to lie to each other, he said. It was a matter of life and death. So when they came to the treaties, and when the bishop said that the treaties will be good for you, take it. And the people who signed the on our behalf said, this is the bishop, the man of God. He must be telling the truth. He can't lie. And so they signed the treaties. And well, the history of the treaties in Canada. And so see, that's the kind of things that I had to relearn, the basic humanistic values that people have. One of the things that somebody used to tell me on a regular basis is that Christianity talks about faith, hope, charity, forgiveness, good people. And for a long time, I believed that until I discovered those things, those values were taught long before Christianity entered my life. Faith, hope, Christian, and those things are not the values of Christianity only. They're human. They're human characteristics. We all have that. And we, the Dene people that I grew up with, we certainly have that. And so one of the things that has become important to me now is that, yes, those values. So today, 70-year-old man I am, and I feel wonderful about that. I feel like I'm finally beginning to feel like what it means to be a Dene, what it means to finally be here and feeling the wonderful joy of being who I'm at, and I would, more than anything else, would want my mom and dad to say that's my son. And he's the kind of person that we always wanted to be. Because I think more than anything else, what I think again is a human trait, not to a particular group, and that is that we all want to be good people, and we want our children to be good people. And I remember a hockey coach reminding me of that teaching. And he said, my grandma used to tell me, I don't want you to be rich, happy, or famous. I just want you to be a good person. And I remember thinking, yes, that's what I've always have been taught, just to be a good human being. And in the process of, and if there's any one thing that I want to accomplish in my life, is that people will say, when I'm gone, they will say he was a good guy, he was a good person, more than anything else that I want to. And that is because that's what my people want me to do. That's what my people want to do. And so one of the things, of course, causes clashes is those ideas, those things, those characteristics on what it is that we want for ourselves and what it is. So if you want millions of dollars, I might not exactly have a great relationship with you because that's not what it is all about for me. But it doesn't mean it can't work. If you want millions of dollars and you get it, you give me half, we'll have a great relationship. But the wonderful thing about it is that reconciliation for me is that I become more honest, become more open, and become more willing, because I know that I don't have the answers. And I know I also need a lot of help yet. I need a lot of learning. I need a lot of support. I can't do things by myself. I should be able to do this. Somehow it's not happening. I know that. I know that. And I accept that. And I also know that you have wonderful ideas. You can help me. The term strong like two people comes from those people who know that whatever society you encounter have something good to offer. My job is to find those good things in every society and make them part of my life, become strong like two people. And when we do that, and some of our strongest elders today are the people that are strong like two people. They may not speak English, they may not comprehend what an English speaker is saying, but they're strong like two people. And the wonderful thing about it is that we, the Dene, the Pshutau Dene, are beginning to say to the rest of Canada, you're going to hear us, you're going to listen to us, because we have something to offer. We have always had intelligent people. We have always had great thoughts. We've always had great stories and great songs. You're no longer going to destroy those. No longer are we allowing you to destroy those. In fact, what we're going to do now is that you're going to listen to them. And we're going to tell you, but not because we're bragging, but we're proud of who we are. And that pride is going to make Canadians and Canada even bigger and better than it has ever been. And I think that's a great loss for Canada and the world when you oppress people. You oppress wonderful ideas, wonderful songs, wonderful stories. Everything, all that characteristics that can make the country even better, you oppress them. The wonderful thing about now is that part of reconciliation, we're not going to allow that anymore. We're going to sing. If you don't hear us, we're going to sing louder. We're going to talk. If you don't hear us, we're going to go out in the streets. We're going to challenge your laws and law in the courts. We're going to do what is necessary to convince you that we're not going to go anywhere. You know, the thing about reconciliation is that I don't know about you people. What I know about the Dene and the Mountain Dene, we have no other place to go. No other place we want to go to. This is home. And it's probably true for a lot of non-Indigenous Canadians too. This is home. You have no place to go. We have no place to go. So what do? We just have to make it work. And I hope that, and I know I have confidence. I have a lot of confidence because some of the younger people that I meet, that I work with, they instill in me a tremendous confidence. And they make me sure that we're going to do this. So I feel really good about where we're going, How we get there, when we get there, it doesn't matter, because I think it's the journey. It's not necessarily where we get at the end. It's that we learn some very basic things, no matter what color, no matter what background. Anyways, I've been talking too much. I hope that you have a couple of questions. I'm not sure I have the answers, but the idea is dialogue. Our elders have always told us communication, communication, communication. And I always like Winston Churchill's, takes a lot of courage to stand up and talk, and it takes a lot of courage to sit down and shut up. So I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Paul. And again, folks, if you have any questions for Paul, if you could put them in the chat and I'll pass them on. Paul, we have one question, and it's not related necessarily to what you're talking about, but in a sense, I think it is. And it may be an unfair question. And if you think it's an unfair question, tell me. But the question is, what do you think about the current debate that's going on in Yellowknife now around the shelter and the divisiveness that debate has created? Are you able to comment on that? Do you want to comment on that?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, the thing, first of all, I think, once upon a time, we would never have a debate. It would happen. And one of the things that I've always have said with people is that people who have addictions, are suffering a disease. And how do you treat people who are suffering? How do you do that? Earlier on, I talked a little bit about enabling. Are we helping or hindering? And this is one of the debates that I think we need to have along this line too, is that where's that moving line? How do we know if we're truly helping them or if we are enabling them to live the kind of lifestyle? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's one of those things that eventually will come out. I hope that people will, that divisiveness that you refer to certainly is there, but I think that division has always been there. I can remember, land claims talks. Trudeau said, we're not going there. You gave up your Aboriginal rights. You're getting 1 square mile per family of 5, end of discussion. So, the division is not new.
Paul, let me ask you a personal question now. If you were to tell me 4 things that you think I should be doing tomorrow as part of National Truth and Reconciliation Day, what would you tell me to do?
Well, the first thing I would say is find somebody, have coffee with them. Just talk to them. It doesn't have to be about reconciliation, it doesn't have to be anything. Just have coffee with somebody that you might normally not have coffee with. I think the action is more important than the words or anything else. And I would also ask the thing, I saw a note somewhere about challenge your bias. I really, really like that. Challenge, don't be afraid to challenge yourself. And be honest. You don't have to tell me I'm not honest with my thoughts. You don't have to share that with anybody, but challenge yourself. And the other thing I definitely think is that, take a chance. There's probably no drum dances or feasts or anything, but if there's a drum dance or there's a feast, go to there. Take a chance that somebody might feed you. Take a chance that somebody might ask you to dance. So take those chances. Remind yourself it's okay to be uncomfortable. Remind yourself it's okay to be that.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that. I'm not seeing any questions. So let's just, if we can, just wait a couple minutes and see if any other questions show up. But to the audience here, I wanted to remind you, or let you know if you don't know already, that the Law Society has a reconciliation committee that is committed to helping all lawyers on their reconciliation journeys. And we've heard Paul talk about how this is a journey. This is not reconciliation is not ticking a box. It is a journey, and it's a lifelong journey. If there's anything that the Law Society can do for any of you in your reconciliation journeys, please let us know, and we'll see what we can do about that. Paul, we do have another question. The question is, what can we do to help the Dene youth stay in the Sahtu?
Well, I thank you. It's a wonderful, really good question. I think a lot of the Dene themselves are asking that same questions also. What can we do to help our young people? And one of the things that I've always have said is that we as older people have to start getting into their lives. And if it means learning technology that we don't know anything about, then we have to get into that uncomfortable zone and learning some of the technologies that they use. I mean, right now I have a whole bunch of nieces and nephews and their children. They text me. I'm not a very good texter. I don't like texting, but in order to communicate with them and say, hello, how are you? Congratulations, or say whatever needs to be said, I learn how to do those kind of stuff. And we also have to push the youth. One of the things that happened in my life was that I got pushed into places I didn't want to go. I told you about the problems that I was going through. The elders took me out in the bush. I didn't want to go in the bush. I felt uncomfortable in the bush. I lost some of the languages. I couldn't speak the languages. I knew they were going to speak the language. I was uncomfortable in there, but they took me out there anyways. So we have to push some of the youth into some of those kind of stuff. I always have thought that people have to help some of the communities with long-term projects. In a couple of communities in the Sahtu, they had a really good basketball program. The teacher left, the program fell apart. Another program, they had a really good dance group. And I know because the dance group were traveling all over the place. And then the person who organized it wanted to pass it on to somebody, nobody there. So one of the things that I think we have to try to do is teach each other some of the very basics of these very valuable things that we carry them on, and that it is the community's responsibility. Will help you, well, but it's up to you. And I think that's the thing that's the real key for me, because there's a lot of great ideas on how to save language, how to save culture, you name it, how to do sports. But it seems like there's, I don't know, 10, 15 volunteers, or maybe, and that's it. Once those volunteers are not there anymore, the thing falls apart. So I think one of the things that we really have to concentrate on is having those connections and responsibilities yeah, I think that some of the elders are willing, but the problem is always language. And again, we get into the uncomfortable zones.
Thank you, Paul. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. So, oh, no, there's some thanks coming in. Paul, you've left us an awful lot to think about. I know that every time I listen to you, you inspire me. And those of you who have listened to Paul understand what a joy it is to have him sitting at the executive table with the Law Society, because he inspires us. Paul, once again, thank you, Masi. Everyone, tomorrow is National Truth and Reconciliation Day. We have sent out a note suggesting some things that you can do. Do something on September 30th. Do something every day that helps you on your reconciliation journey. Anything else, Paul?
No, thank you. thank you for the opportunity, and this is just a start. It might be a rough ride, but what the hell, we're in it together.
We are indeed. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.